All right, welcome back to another Bridging the Gap. I think we decided that we're going to stay with Bridging the Gap at least. And we're going to bridge quite a large gap today. Probably go through violence, bullying, perspective. I don't know. We were having an offline conversation where I texted you a message last night about a thought process that I had. And we're both big Mindhunter fans. And I was telling him that I was waiting for my wife last night before dinner, and I picked up a YouTube video just to kind of bide my time until she showed up, and it was a snippet of Ed Kemper saying something about reliving the crime, so either going back to the crime scene or having a token, and it made me think about the internet today. And I'll just read you what I wrote because it's just easier. I said, here we are. The internet does not allow one to dull the senses of a past transgression. Rather, it allows one to feverishly relive and re-enrage or fall in love more greatly each time the moment is revisited. And it reminded me of this Ed Kemper thing, which is much like a serial killer returns to the scene of a crime or keeps a token. So, once something is on the internet, it's just on there pretty much forever because anyone can kind of pick it up and save it, which is also kind of weird because we have a whole industry around that. Like I think Twitchy.com or something like that. Basically, the whole business model is grabbing tweets off the internet, especially before people delete them, to say, nope, you definitely said this.
Yeah,
you might have deleted it, but it's out there forever.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what they say about, certain other social media ways of communicating, like it's gone within 2 minutes or within 5 minutes, whatever it is. And people just take screenshots.
Yeah.
Like it's,
yeah.
It sounds good, I guess, for a second, and then they just post the screenshot.
Yes.
And why does it matter? And then it's there forever. And whatever you said in that moment of anger or in the middle of the night when you weren't thinking clearly, that's now there forever. And you and whoever you said it to are reliving that over and over and over again. And like you said in there, what does that do to a relationship?
Yeah, so what's interesting to me about my own stress anxiety is that anytime I put something out there, I'm really trying to do my best to think it through. But inevitably, once I hit send or whatever, or especially posting on Facebook for business or whatnot, the last part of me says, well, if anyone has trouble with this, I did the best I can at this point. It's like you really had to be digging to find something wrong with this at this point.
Yeah.
And that's the fear that I think a lot of communication is having these days, where I can't imagine, here I am as a 45-year-old man, running his own business, been writing my entire adult life, was a philosophy major in college, so I have an idea of how a logical train of thought is, and I still have to manage the illogical, emotional person that's just going to pick one thing out of context and then just start, hammering me. So I can't imagine what it's like for younger generations to come up in this day and age. Obviously, with everything, eventually people will find a way to assimilate to it, but it's got to be hard.
Definitely. And I think we've talked about it before a little bit, that a guy named Albert Mehrabian did these research studies to find out that only about 7% of what I understand of what you mean about what you say and how you feel about what you say is the words I choose. The entire rest of it is body language, tone of voice, all that stuff. So you're only accessing that 7% from that other person. So I don't just have to reread my thing and think, does this make logical sense to me? I then have to read it and say, what is the other person going to think about what I sent? And that's a text. If it's a tweet, I have to think, what are the 10,000 people, however many people who might see this, going to think I meant by this or what I read by this? And most people don't think that much when they tweet. They're just like, that's out there forever now. And it should be sobering to be like, wow, anyone could see this, that I wrote this 15 years from now in a job interview. But you give that to a 16-year-old. Who's thinking at 16, this could affect me at 38?
Yes.
Nobody.
Well, there's no.
But it does.
Yeah,
and it can.
And there's no room for error. That's
Not
the
when it's
issue.
permanent.
There's just no room for error, especially for young kids. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, is that when I do videotape kids for testing, I always give them the same opening speech. We're going to be testing. I'm going to put the video up. That means even people in the background. And I would say especially for people in the background, because people are always looking around things, is don't stick your finger in your nose. Don't stick your finger in your mouth. Don't stick your finger in your ear. Don't put your toes in your mouth. Whatever it is, sit up straight. Be a stone statue. You should think about this anytime someone pulls out a video camera, that whatever is going to be recorded right now might be on the internet forever.
Yeah. And it might be you knuckle deep in your nose in the background.
It's just it can't imagine being a kid this way. I made too many mistakes to get where I've gotten, and as I say, that youth and experience is wasted. Wait, sorry. Was it the old age and treachery kind of quote, where it's experience is wasted on the old, and how is that it's just, it unwinds the whole thing. But with old age and treachery will always beat out youth and exuberance, or something like that. And something like his exuberance is wasted on youth, and wisdom is wasted on the old. It's like one of those things.
Yeah.
And
like,
you
can we trade?
you can't get there. You can't get there without completely gumming up things like what I just said in order to figure it out. And if you're not allowed that opportunity to figure things out, how does anyone figure anything out?
And when you can go back and people have a great memory. If I ask you, what are the 10 things you're the most proud of in your whole life? People usually get like top 1, 2, 3 maybe, and then they're like, they got to pull, they got to think. It takes a while to make that list. And then if I say, top 10 things you're most embarrassed about, you're like, do I only have 10? Do I have to whittle it down? Right? They come up like that. It's so much worse if you're like, hold on a minute, I'll show you. If it's like, because I carry it with me in my pocket all the time. 3 of my top 5 are right here in my pocket at all times.
Yes.
And then the other side of that is, people are, if you have to say something horrible to somebody, really mean, in person, it's going to be at a certain level, except for certain people who will just say, whatever they're thinking to anybody. Most people are going to temper it because they're in the middle of a school hallway. There's other people around, and it's like, am I going to take this there? When it's online, there's none of that. None of that happens.
The old joke when we were in school is that would be beer muscles, where you just like I don't care what I say, I'm just so mad at this person, or I'm so in love with this person, like I just smash my face up against you. But now it's like internet muscles, which is all the time.
And it's so much worse. And it used to happen just in cars, where people would feel very, bold, and because, I'm in my car and they're in their car, I can't really see them. But if somebody like pulled in front of you and some, 6'9" guy, 400 pounds of muscle gets out of the car, you'd be like, that's my bad. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry about There's not even that moment online. It's just I can say anything horrible to whoever I want whenever I want to.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because an apology is typically as ineffective as deleting something on the internet. Because the transgression is always going to get more play than the apology. And it reminds me of the conversation we're having about brains, and specifically how the brain is wired to look for problems. Once we have constants, it just goes into the old bin. It doesn't really matter. It's like gravity, whatever. Sun rises and sets, whatever.
You just ignore it.
Because you can't do that. Every single time I walk into this kitchen table, I know where this kitchen table is. I stop thinking about it, because if I had to think about it, just too much RAM. And the RAM is really dealing with problems. So it's always easy to get that RAM up and running and picking up different problems, because that's what we're most focused on, because we don't want to smash ourselves, we don't want to die, we don't want to be ostracized for our society. But now we've been given a tool that makes it nearly impossible to learn how not to be ostracized, how not to be smashed, and how to be killed in a social media sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead, and then I have an interesting story that was.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting that you say that, and the brain is wired to pull out usually the negative. I mean, it's good at it's okay at picking up both ends of the spectrum, things that are really positive or really negative that are just outside the norm. But if I like put $1 somewhere in your apartment, it might take you a while to see it. If I put a hole in one of your walls, you'd notice it the second you walked into the room. You're like, what's that?
Yeah.
Right? It's wired to grab the negative and then retain it and then hold on to it and then investigate it.
No, it's just a problem that way. And I was talking to some kids I was teaching yesterday in a scout troop. One of the things I bring up is emotions. So when you're talking about the two ends of the spectrum of finding something great like extra money versus finding a hole in the room, it'd be a lot easier to find the hole in the room. And I was explaining to them that emotions are basically flags waving or an alarm bell going off. And it doesn't matter which one it is, extreme positive or extreme negative, and just how both of them can lead you to being out of control. And that one of the things that we address in the school is the things I need to think about when someone says anything to me. And I can't remember if we said this in the podcast, but I'm pretty sure we had this conversation, is, do I value that person and trust their opinions of things? Do I have some type of long-term relationship? And is what they're saying true? So anything you say to me, I value your opinion. So most things that you say to me, I'm going to take to heart and say, okay, Dan's trying to help me. We're a collective unit here trying to improve each other. Pretty much anything Dan says, I'm going to trust and value and take to heart. So if you call me a jerk, I would immediately pause and think, what did I just do wrong? Let me evaluate my behavior and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to come off that way. Let me rephrase that. That's my bad. If you said something great, I would be like, whoa, Dan really liked what I said, or he really liked the exchange that we had. That's fantastic. That encourages me to act more that way. We're nothing different than dogs in that regard. You gave me a little you gave me a little Triscuit, and like, yeah, great. I want to have more of those exchanges with you. Smack me in the nose for taking a dump on the carpet, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Sorry, Dad. and that's a normal course of behavior, but if we are not taking that moment, we're no different than the person who just tried to instigate the problem. So I say to them, if someone says something mean, our immediate reaction typically is to boomerang that right back. It's like the old joke when you're a little kid is, I'm rubber, you're a glue. Anything you say bounces off me and sticks to you.
Yeah.
And then the person changes the tack. Like, you're great. You're fantastic. I love you. You're the best ever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you kind of fall into that trap. So my goal with kids that way, I can have this conversation with adults slightly different, but essentially the same adage is involved, which is, do I trust that person, or do I value their opinion, and is what they're saying true? And we don't do that on the internet.
No.
We all of a sudden it's like tabula rasa, and like you said, it's 7% communication because there's no body language and connection with somebody. So you read something that is completely innocuous to your 10,000 Twitter followers. I share it with my friend who's ultra sensitive or a deep dive into how they read it, what they call it, close reading, and tears it apart and says, how dare you send me this offensive tweet? I'm like, what? I'm like, huh? He's just talking about how wonderful of a day it was and that he's lucky to be alive. I don't know. Like, what?
Which part was offensive?
Which part was offensive? And then all of a sudden they're mad at me and they're mad at you.
Yeah, because you decided to send it, and I'm the initial evil.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then they forward it to a whole bunch of other people that they don't like what you had to say. And it's like, how is this even possible? We're all speaking the same language.
And that's the thing, right? The language doesn't matter. It's and if I got an argument with someone and they only spoke French, which I speak none of, and I only spoke English and they spoke none of it, we could both get a pretty quick idea of whether or not we like each other.
Yes.
Right? I'd be like, I don't know what this guy's saying, but he hates me. I'm pretty positive. You know?
He's pretty irritated.
It matters so much less the words.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I could meet someone on Twitter and be like, I'm pretty sure this person hates me, and they don't. Or I'm pretty sure this person really seems to think I'm pretty smart, and they're being sarcastic the entire time, and there's no way to know.
Well, and the other thing with the internet is the whole universe of trolling. So there are people on the internet that their complete existence is there to troll. So you don't even know if they're a real person, and people are getting all upset about people they don't know. And it just came out that some popular Twitter user is actually a guy, and he created this female persona specifically to troll people on both sides of the political spectrum. And now the guy's written a book. You know, so you have to be careful. You have to wonder where the origin is coming from. And as one of the memes I just posted yesterday, it's a picture of Smokey the Bear, and it says, "Only you can prevent Facebook drama." You know, and that's just scroll past it. And if you don't like it, just skip it. Don't engage in it. You don't have to. You don't have to get involved in every single brush fire on the internet. More importantly, you don't need to try and weaponize it by creating your own brush fires everywhere you go, by trying to be offended, or by trying to be the knight that's going to save all the other people from
this horrible comment.
Meme or
don't worry, I'll
tweet,
stand in front of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've got your back.
And I've talked to a few, especially teenagers, because they get sucked into it so easily, and they'll say about trolls, and adults say it too, how does this person have nothing better to do? Like, how do you have nothing better to do than just go online and get a rise out of people? And then my question is usually, how do you have nothing better to do then go online and respond to those people and give them exactly what it is they're looking for? Yeah. And they're usually like, dang it. Like I talked myself into this corner and I can't find a way out. It's like, you must have something better to do. I'm positive you have something better to do.
Yes.
Then respond to this person whose only goal in life is to get you to respond in an angry way so they can just keep you stuck. Yeah, it's weird that person has nothing better going on. It's equally weird that you have nothing better going on.
What's funny is people who follow people they specifically don't like.
Yeah, just to get mad.
I'm going to watch this news program, or I'm going to watch this TV show I hate just to find out how much I hate these people.
Yeah. I'm going to watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, whichever is the one you hate.
Yes.
Just to, I'm so angry.
And then go to the gym and pump iron. Well, that would be at least more productive.
It would be more productive than just sitting there and being mad about people you disagree with.
Yeah.
When, who cares?
Yeah.
Some of the news is full of trolls too, who just say things outlandish, so these people agree with them and these people hate them for it. And either way, attention's attention and watching is watching.
Yeah. So funny. So if anyone's watching this, I think they should create a new song. You know the song "Walk On By"? It's like maybe 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Someone should write a song, a parody of "Scroll On By." You just scroll on by because
you get angry for a second, like, the people are so ridiculous, and then you just keep going.
Or just sing the Frozen song that everyone hates. Let it go.
Or Shake It Off.
Shake It Off. There
whoever you want to go with,
because we don't want to offend anybody. Just choose
whatever time period
choose the
makes
time
sense
period
to you.
and singer that makes sense to you, and just follow their advice.
And I think the hard thing is, like we talked about, bridging the fact that it's always out there forever, and that people are willing to say much more outlandish stuff. The other thing people do a lot, which I guess makes sense to me on one level and doesn't make sense to me on another, is they'll go back and read all their own posts and look at their own Facebook feed over and over again, which is this very weird process of being an audience member to yourself. Mm-hmm. And like, it's bad when you're with too many people who agree with you. It's even worse when you're just reading your own stuff. I mean, then you really have no checks and balances. Because you're just like, I am great. This is some amazing stuff this guy wrote.
So I'm going to have to make an admission to something. I do that at times, but not for the reason you're thinking. So every Monday and Friday, I put a post out to town forums. They have their days that businesses are allowed to post. And I must look at them. Probably the first few likes I get 5 or 6 times. And the reason why I look at them is slightly different. I'm an editing junkie. So if I go back and I look at it, because like you said, you can read your thing a million times, and I was like, oh man, I use swipe. The word it was there twice. I gotta go back and edit it and delete it. And then I'll go back and I should have put a comma there. I'll go back.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, that's the wrong there, because I was swiping again. So that's kind of.
Well, I do the
That's
same
the kind of
thing
crazy
with-
person I am for that reason, because especially from a professional standpoint,
Yeah.
as it's getting likes, it's going to get more views. As it gets more views, I'm concerned, oh, now they think I also can't write, spell, punctuate correctly.
I'll do the same thing with emails at work. Like I send a work email to someone, and I'll even send them an email afterwards saying, like, obviously this should have been spelled like that, and there's no reason for me to tell you this, but it was going to bother me. And
That's great.
Or to like send an email and you're like, that was a really good email, and you go back and read it again, you're like, yeah, I nailed
That
that.
was a good one.
But then you usually move on.
Yes.
I think the part where it gets into a problem is when you start reading it for that emotional thing of
Yeah.
going back to the crime scene,
Look how smart
looking
I am.
over the body,
Yeah.
and like going back and exhuming the corpse over and over and over again.
So let's go there for a second, because there was a conversation we were having offline, but I want to bring up this quote that a friend of mine wrote named Paul Sharp, who's a ex-Illinois Police Department guy, as well as somebody who's into combatives, firearms, knife, and hand-to-hand type stuff. And he wrote a great post, and he said, sometimes I think about relationships in whatever form they take, and I think about how it would be damaging to try to figure out the person, whether it's a significant other, friend, or one of my kids. It's like an autopsy. You can dig in and figure out what's inside and how everything works, but the person you're digging into won't survive. And I think that has to do with all the stuff we're talking about, which is looking at a post and exhuming the body, so to speak, and just bringing it back up and just almost hating on the person for something they said 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you can't find the apology, even if they apologized, and it's not worth it anyway.
You don't even
because,
see it.
Yeah, you can scroll right past it. There's too many comments. So, like you were saying, is going back to the scene of the crime and just how this psychological tick to try and pick up some type of value in a tragedy sometimes. I think comedy is probably a little bit more uplifting, but I don't think we do that. I don't think people go back to find the funny comments
It doesn't seem
as
like it.
much. I
Just
could be
like all
wrong.
the positive life events isn't what you pull from.
They probably want to go back and I just want to go back and remember just how stupid or idiotic or mean this person is, and go back and relive it. And it made me wonder, kind of what we're talking about, is what does that provide for that person? When you go back and go to the scene of the crime, if you're literally a murderer, a la Mindhunter, or you voluntarily go back to the scene of a crime where you've been offended, that's really weird. Like, I'm not sure which one I'm more freaked out by, and that's a pretty great line that I'm saying here, but like, you kind of understand the criminal mindset of going back and being elated and kind of patting themselves on the back for doing something successful. I'm not condoning
Of
murder
course, you're
or
not
whatever,
condoning it,
obviously,
but you're acknowledging the fact that person
Yes.
gets a dopamine hit.
Yes.
They get it. It's a positive experience,
Yes.
as horrible as we all see it, because
Yes.
it's horrible. They get a positive experience from it, so it makes sense that you go back to somewhere you got a
Yeah.
positive experience.
But this would be like the victim coming back from the dead and showing up to the crime scene.
Yeah. Or if a potential victim escaped
Yes.
from a serial killer,
And
and
then-
it was like, what I want to do? I want to go back
to the serial
that
killer's
house.
house.
And not to like overcome it, just to like, I want to go back and be there, and I want to be in the room I was kept
Yeah.
in. You'd be like, what is going on?
What's wrong with
I mean,
you?
the first thought
Yeah.
you would have is, I think you need to go see someone. Like, you need
Yeah.
professional help.
Yeah.
But we don't seem to do that when someone does it emotionally.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
just so strange to me. So I don't understand why people relive things that they don't like. Like, I don't care for horror movies. It's not that they're scary and I'm going to have nightmares. It's just that real life is already scary enough. I don't get a lot of joy watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3000. You know, it's just, okay. And it's weird because I like Mindhunter. Mindhunter is about real life. That show is actually discussing what makes people tick. And that is something I can wrap my brain around. And probably from all practical purposes, that's more scary than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just a total fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's just a blood and gut fest.
Yeah.
It's
a bunch
it's
of
all gratuitous.
teenagers who make consistently bad decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And always tripping over the tree root. No matter what. Pick up your damn feet.
Yeah.
When you're running from bad people, pick up your damn feet.
And apparently, serial killers don't have to run.
No.
Because they can walk after you, and it doesn't matter how fast you're running.
Because they know
they're catching up.
They have a lot of tree roots.
Yeah.
Serial
One
killers,
of them will get them.
Yeah, serial killers basically employ a lot of trees.
Yeah. The MVP of the serial killer movies is the roots.
That's exactly why he has a chainsaw. He's really an arborist.
That's what it's all really about. It's about the trees.
It's really Texas arborist.
The trees want him to do it.
It's like, I'm just a misunderstood tree doctor.
It's like Son of Sam, but with trees.
Okay, I like that.
We went off the rails there for a
We
minute.
totally went off the rails, but it's good. We're enjoying ourselves.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're enjoying yourself. I can't wrap my head around that. And people who get charged up by being enraged are those people that don't really have control over their physical well-being when they actually get into a potential physical confrontation. I think those are the people who are most lit up fastest. And I remember an old girlfriend of mine was training in a yoga teacher conference thing for a month at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And I would visit her on the weekends, and it's a beautiful facility in a beautiful area, and they've got a fantastic cafeteria where a lot of the food is grown on the premises. So I would hang out in the cafeteria sometimes towards the end of her class. I'd get up a little bit early, eat something, have a cup of coffee. So I met a lot of people because it's me. And I was talking to a yoga teacher who was, not in class at the time, because it's very much like a collegiate kind of experience up there. And we were talking, and he found out I was a martial artist. And as we were talking about stress, anxiety, and the reduction that yoga and martial arts, provide, he paused and he realized, oh my gosh, if I walked up to one of my yoga practitioners and went, boo, they would probably freak out. He says, but if I did that to you, you'd probably just look at me and say, what's this all about?
Yeah, like, what are you doing?
And it was a really interesting conversation and realization that when you are used to dealing with conflict and understanding how conflict works, and you're peeling away the layers and disentangling all the emotional and intellectual gravitas that goes into what causes a conflict, you're much more loath to engage in physical conflict, because you kind of understand what it's about, and you can kind of check yourself, like I was teaching the kids, which is, do I value this person, right, and their opinion, and is what they say true? And if it's a random stranger trying to puff up their chest and start a fight with me, and you're engaging in that, who is controlling who? And as I say, the only way to be free is to control yourself. So why would I engage in some random stranger's drama, right, on the physical front?
Absolutely.
But on the internet, we go looking for it. Like, oh,
and then go revisit it.
Yeah, let me go find someone who's mean that I don't like and I think is stupid, and just read all their stuff and just get completely enraged, and then hop in the car and drive to work.
And then the interesting thing is what you're talking about is confidence, actual confidence. Mm-hmm. And people conflate confidence and narcissism and bravado. They think that narcissism, bravado, cockiness, whatever you want to call that, is the extreme of confidence. And it's not. Someone who's really confident doesn't have to go around talking about how great they are, how tough they are, how strong they are. It's the opposite. People who don't have enough confidence put on a big show
Yes.
because they think it makes people think that they're confident. And it works because most people do think that's wow, that person really thinks a lot of themselves. They don't. Because if a 7 foot tall black belt who's pure muscle was walking around, they're not gonna have to go up and show everyone and prove to everyone how tough they are.
Have you seen my muscles?
They're just walking around.
Yeah.
Just being, because they're very confident probably that
Yes.
like if something happened, you'd probably lose.
Yeah.
They don't need to go around. It's probably the person who doesn't feel like they can handle themselves, who's jumping around behind their friend. You're lucky he's here. Otherwise, it's,
Hold me back!
Yeah.
Seriously, somebody hold me
Yeah,
back.
please hold me back. Please
Hold me
don't
back,
let
please.
go.
I don't want to go to those.
Yeah. That's the person who's not confident. And same in the social realm. Someone who's constantly telling you how much better they are than you and how great they are
Yes.
usually doesn't think very much of themselves.
Or they're trolling you.
Yeah, and they just want you to get upset.
And this is, it's like a stranger danger. You know, why would you engage in somebody you have no clue who they are and what motivates them? You know, you wouldn't walk up to a random stranger and say, what do you think about this hot button topic that I'm really sensitive about?
Exactly. It seems like that's a lot of what trolls get out of it is a very watered down, somewhat less dangerous version of what a serial killer gets out of it, which is the complete and utter control of another human life. And there's an interesting quality that people seem to get from taking control over another human being.
Yeah.
So if I say this, I'm going to dictate how the rest of your hour goes.
Yes.
And how you feel, what you spend your time doing, what you're responding to and saying. I get to control you for an hour.
Yeah.
And that seems to be some of what they get out of it. And why would you want to give that to them? It's because when you have a serial killer, they abduct someone usually, and they're not like, hey, I'm a serial killer, this is kind of something I do. If you could get in my car with me, I'd love to kill you.
Yeah.
You don't get to be like, no, it's not for me, it's not my scene.
No
you
thanks.
do get to do that online.
Yes, absolutely.
It's really like getting in the car with the person and be like, well, you know what? I have an hour to kill, and if this is something that you like to do,
Let's just go toe to toe.
exactly.
Just
Why don't
trade
you just go
insults.
murder me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense from the victim's perspective.
No, and it's it kind of reminds me a little bit. Remember the Steve Martin movie called L.A. Story?
Yes.
Or L.A. Love Story, whatever it is. And they're going up. This is the basically the predecessor to ATMs. ATMs were just starting to come out in this movie, and it was the first time I think an ATM was actually featured in a movie. And there's a whole bunch of people queued up to get cash at the ATM, and a whole bunch of robbers queued up to take some of the money. And Steve Martin gets his money, turns around with his date, and the robber sticks a gun and says, "Hi, my name is Rob. I'll be your robber tonight," basically. And without even a break in the conversation with the girl, he just gives the robber some of the money as they walk off. And you see in the background the same thing happening. It's just mind-numbing that people get involved in that. And I think it kind of brings us full circle to the kind of digging into someone to the point that you exhume the body. You've now basically rendered the other personality moot because you're just digging into what they're saying and not where it's coming from. So, one, especially on the internet, you don't know if it's a real person. Two, if you know the person and you're getting into, say, a Twitter or Facebook feud with somebody, first of all, when did it become acceptable to have an open airing of the grievances in a public forum between two people who know each other? Just pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone if you're going to have a sensitive argument where you're going to possibly lay waste to your relationship because you're both fighting in somewhat of an avatar exchange on the internet of my written persona versus your written persona. No one else also knows how much inside joking might be intertwined into the argument or conversation. possibly adding fuel to other people jumping in. Like, yeah, you get him, Dan. No, you get him, Darren. Yeah, what Dan said. What?
I'd really be like, if I was like, Darren, I have a problem with you, and we need to have it out. Let's go to the middle of the mall. We'll invite some friends, and we'll just have a massive fight. Everyone would be like, this is grossly inappropriate. But this is a larger scale. What you're talking about is an even larger scale than that, and it doesn't seem inappropriate.
So this kind of brings up a thought process behind the next state of kids, which is dealing with stress, anxiety, and the rise in suicide. Specifically, if I remember correctly, you know these stats better than I do, but the largest rise in suicide is approximately age 10 to 14 over the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, that's
right?
that's the statistics I saw too. Yeah, that was,
So-
that was the rise, and then elderly. Those were
Okay,
the two
yeah.
that seemed to be going up,
Okay.
and the numbers that I saw.
We'll shelve the elderly conversation
Absolutely,
for
yeah.
now, because that's a whole other topic that I think is not affected by what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Most elderly people are probably not being affected by social media, and that's causing them stress emotionally in their lives.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So we'll
Different
just-
situations,
yeah.
different
If we want to talk about that, we'll do that later.
Yeah.
But the kid situation, I think, is really relevant, because the whole kind of jocular conversation that we're having about the way adults engage on the internet is, I think, precisely why the rise in 10 to 14-year-old suicides is occurring. Because even though those same adults that we are talking about, who are engaging on the internet and having these discussions and having these attitude adjustments as to how they engage online versus in real life, how many of these bad habits are we unconsciously, subliminally, subconsciously imparting to children? Because I know I've seen some parents who would be the first people to espouse my belief system and my behavioral coaching in conflict with their kids. They will also be the same parents that will create this kind of Facebook drama fire in their lives.
With suicide of any level, one of the major things that you're looking out for is the person feeling isolated, misunderstood, completely alone, and the biggest one is, hopelessness. That this situation, as bad as it is, could never get any better. This is my life forever now. Because even if the person feels isolated and alone and depressed and sad, if they still are holding on to this could get better, this could be better, a lot of times they're at less risk, at least, for making that kind of decision.
Yeah.
Because there's at least a light. This could improve, this could go away. But when you lose that and it's like, I'm stuck here, then that's when the person's like, well, then why? Like, why keep going if this awfulness is forever?
Yeah.
And when the internet magnifies everything, it magnifies the positive, it magnifies the negative, everything's just more of whatever it is. In teenagers, when you feel isolated, when you feel depressed, when there's something you're embarrassed about, and the internet magnifies it magnifies the feelings of isolation. And like we've already talked about, it's permanent.
Yes.
So if it's permanent, my state is permanent, it magnifies all of those things.
And what's interesting about that is it also brings the past into play in a way that's never been able to be brought forth before. So when you're 10 and you said something stupid, and at 14 you're starting to get the nascent stages of feeling suicidal, and you're getting maybe picked on or just feeling poorly about yourself, when you feel poorly about yourself, you're probably pretty self-reflective in a way that isn't constructive.
Yeah.
So then that 14-year-old boy or girl looks back at their 10-year-old self and that comment they made that everyone made fun of them about, like, you're so silly, you're so stupid, how could you think that? Rather than deleting that, which you also have control, you've left that there. And someone who is desperate and doesn't have the tools to fix that, they're not deleting things in order to kind of restart. And more importantly, if you have a really bad crew following you and almost rooting for your demise, they'll just be exhuming that negative or a negative event of any kind and reposting it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we saw that you deleted this. Let's bring it back to you. Which is kind of interesting because I'm of two minds, because this young woman in Massachusetts that kind of texted her ex-boyfriend to suicide. Do you remember this case?
Yeah.
So I'm of two minds because, one, I get how bad that is, and I don't know exactly what she said, so I'm not going to pretend like I do. But I do have a problem with the state at large saying you talked someone to death, because, you know, and I get the idea that all slopes are slippery, but that's a slippery one.
Very slippery.
Because now it depends on how you define talking someone to death. If you and I are having a conversation and no one likes it, but they're watching it on YouTube and they feel depressed because they can't stand listening to us, but yet they feel compulsive enough to keep watching us, can we be held accountable for someone watching this? It's like, this is the worst podcast ever. That's it. I'm living in purgatory. I can't watch any more of Dan and Darren. That's it. I'm offing myself. You know, that's a problem that I have with the weaponizing words. And this is, I think, a problem that we have in our society, is that we are taking this a little bit too far. And my concern is we'll just eradicate conversation completely, which is the worst possible thing. Because if everyone can be offended and almost anyone can be held accountable in a myriad of ways that no one could ever possibly have had the forethought to think of before they say that, then no one talks, which is the worst possible outcome.
By far. And it puts everyone in a situation where they're more isolated and less likely to get the help that they need. And instead of, we need to make sure that those people who need some mental health support, who are usually in a state where they're not going to seek it out themselves, they need help getting to it because that's the state that they're in. How do we get to them? How do we reach them? It's more about, you know, how do we get rid of all this other stuff so that the world is so pure and so clean and so good that no one gets to that state. That's unrealistic. That's a ridiculous thing to even think. Like, how do we eradicate violence? How do we eradicate anything bad? You can't. You have to learn how to deal with it in real life. And the conversation about, like, let's make everything PC and get rid of anything offensive is ridiculous. Would that be nice? Maybe. I don't know, but it's not even worth talking about because it's not possible.
No.
It's not a thing that can happen.
No, the human condition is the Pandora's box.
Yeah.
So I don't find it, let's put it this way, I find it more restrictive and less fun to live in a life that is clean with no mess. Right? Because part of the joy of life is figuring out your mess. And that's part of the purpose. You know, talking about the hopelessness is that some kid feeling really horrible about themselves, if we as adults are giving the subliminal message that once you're X, you're forever X, and it will never change, you're in that purgatory trajectory, that is the nihilistic hopelessness that a child feels. And if you don't allow them to experience the fact that everyone is a mess trying to tidy themselves up and continually tidy themselves up, and that is part of the goal of the human condition, then you're not giving them any hope. And this is one of the issues that we've talked about before, that I have an issue with the HIV policies in a lot of schools. Some of them have been changed a little bit, but for those who don't know, the HIV policies are harassment, intimidation, and bullying policies that govern basically how kids interact, to the point that it makes it difficult for them to interact without having some arbiter that is not of their maturity level and somehow has forgotten what it's like to be that maturity level. So you have adult-like extrapolation of childlike squabbles being imposed on kids. Kids say stupid, hurtful things to each other, sometimes because they're friends, sometimes because they're trolling each other. Sometimes because they're actually mad at each other and just need to vomit at each other and let it go. And then if you have an adult who is purely concerned about covering your butt legally, has to interject in this immature battle of wits in a basically what's a sandbox fight, rather than allowing them to kind of figure it out, as long as it's not getting extremely violent, because I have a higher threshold, I think, when young boys specifically, if they're looking at pushing, shoving, and punching each other to some degree, I think there's value in that being expressed at an earlier age where the stakes are low and the risks of real injury are also very low, because they learn immediately that this is probably not the best way to go about our lives. But without that experience, without that messiness, they don't become adults that eschew words for violence.
And it's also a really dangerous situation when you have an adult trying to be the mediator between two kids on a consistent everyday basis. For big things, yeah, adults need to get involved and help figure it out. Because a lot of times adults don't realize that it's a two-way process, that as you're trying to figure out the situation, you're influencing the child's understanding of the situation. If one child says to another child, like, I'm going to kill you, in their head, I mean, I don't know how many times my brothers and I told each other we were going to kill each other.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Which just meant we were going to get in a fight. And but when an adult says, this is a big deal, you threaten that person's life,
now we have to bring the police in.
The adult thinks that they're making that child take it seriously. What they're doing is they're interjecting the possibility that to that child that they may have wanted to kill the other.
Yes.
When they hadn't thought of it like that until the adult suggested maybe you did want to kill them.
Yeah.
And it's a grown-up saying it, so they internalize it and say, maybe I did.
Yeah.
It's just like if you diagnose someone. If I diagnose someone incorrectly with depression, I'm going to make them more depressed because I told them they were depressed, and they're like, well, he's the therapist, he knows better than me, I must be depressed.
Yes.
I must have wanted to kill that thing because a grown-up said it. And they don't respect the power they have in that situation.
Yeah.
Now you just made that worse.
Yep.
It's worse now than it was when you hadn't done anything.
Think about the word love, just for a second. When you're a kid, maybe on your first romantic exploration, the word love is so not love, it's probably just lust. As you get older, you learn to tease away love from lust and figure out the difference. As you get married or have kids, the meaning of love changes probably exponentially. And it's a different kind of love with your kids that you have with your wife has with you. It's a totally different situation. And I'm not condoning violence because nobody wants their kid to get hit, but the meaning of a fisticuff and a shoving match at, say, sub 12 years old is also the same meaninglessness and misunderstanding of what it means to fight. And if they don't have that taste and experience, they can't actually tease away love, hate, kill, fight, argument, conflict, verbal disagreement. Because verbal disagreement is what most fighting becomes. And because young people, specifically young boys, aren't verbally adept, they default to physical violence. That's their setting. There's nothing wrong with that. It's biologically how they create themselves. We have a therapist right here who will vouch for me. It's in our DNA, it's in our gene pool to roughhouse. And if we're not given that opportunity to roughhouse, often over the exchange of words, then we actually don't understand how to be normal males that can control physical violence versus verbal argument. We don't understand how to draw the line. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Absolutely, and these are our beyond the room segments within Bridging the Gap.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to, we expect kids when they're adults to be capable of things that we didn't inoculate them for slowly over time. So If it's like if I tell my daughter, you can't look at another boy, or you can't be attracted to anyone, boy or girl, you can't have any kind of relationship whatsoever with anyone at all that I don't think is purely friends, and we can't ever discuss or talk about romantic feelings until you're 20. And then at 20, I expect her to have and manage complex romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Well, how?
Yep.
How? I didn't give her any experience, and then I expect her to do it. I think there are some people who would be like, yeah, what you just said is exactly what I do with my kids.
Yeah.
But I'm sure most people would be like, yeah, that is ridiculous to expect her to be able to do that. Or my son to say, you can't be in a relationship, we can't talk about other, and then intelligently deal with all those feelings and hormones and emotions when you're 20 without us ever doing anything about it. It's so much more charged when you do the same thing with violence and aggression.
Yeah.
A lot of people can get on board with the sex conversation, that they need to have conversation, they need to have context. Then you say, okay, it's kind of the same thing for aggression.
Yeah.
That you have to let kids experience it and inoculate it in a safe manner. Not that you shouldn't have normal red flags.
Yes, exactly.
Like if your kid's, playing with knives in the kitchen and stuff, you need to ask a few questions. If your kid's beating kids up every day at school, you need to see if they need some extra help.
Yeah.
Find out what's going on. But two kids just roughhousing with each other, getting into a fist fight, it's a teachable moment.
Yes.
Instead of you're a demon.
Yes.
That's evil behavior.
Yep.
You can never feel or do that again.
And now
And
let's
drive it underground.
Now let's bring the police and a clinical psychologist to root out your evil. I mean, like how damaging is that to a kid?
And then now 22, deal with aggression in the workplace and all that kind of stuff. You go ahead and deal with that appropriately in a safe manner, even though I've never allowed you to experience it.
So this also brings up another note we had here, which is learning really occurs simultaneously to teaching. So we've had this conversation before, and it's really interesting that anytime you share a lesson with somebody, just because you're sharing, this kind of comes full circle with our communication breakdown here. Once you share something with somebody, it doesn't mean that they automatically got the lesson. First of all, 7% is getting communicated.
Yeah.
Second of all, everyone takes a certain amount of time to process that lesson, more so than others. Some people take lots of repetition of hearing this over and over again. And then lastly, like the conversation that we were having about love and lust and how we separate those things and how we mature into understanding what those words mean. When I was teaching with my teacher from 97 to 2014, I must have heard the same lesson on a weekly basis in any given class, because we had repetitive classes, obviously, easily 3 to a half a dozen times. I was not bored with it. I was not ticked off that he was giving the same lesson. I learned to glean more depth in the same words, class after class, until one, I understood more fully any given lesson, which gave me not only the ability to be a more effective teacher, but gave me a goal on how to be a student. One of the other issues that I think that parents of this generation have, and I can only speak of parents of this generation because I'm teaching their kids. I'm not going to critique my own parents because that's a whole different story and it's personal. And I didn't know how the generations of parents acted around their kids any more so than my own neighborhood. So I'm not going to generalize, but over 20 years of teaching, I've seen this progressive change where parents often don't see the micro movement of their kids' experience. So if certain, and not all parents, if certain parents see their child having the same lesson over and over again, they begin to question the validity of the lesson. And we've discussed this before. It doesn't matter what it is. Every single skill is a perishable skill. Adults start to take for granted the skill sets that they have and start to transpose or imbue their mind into their kid's experience and undermine their kid's experience because they look at the lesson and say, that's a simple lesson, my kid must get that lesson by now. Why is the instructor going through that lesson again? Whereas, just like we were talking about with conflict, that's like taking 2 7-year-olds and 2 adults looking at 2 7-year-olds and like, wow, they're so irrational, we need to stop them. Well, of course they're irrational, they're 7.
Yeah.
So to imbue your intellect and experience as a 40 or 30 or 50-year-old person into young children and expect them to have the wisdom and experience that you have decades and decades later, and then create the environment so that it's hermetically sealed in your mind about how it should work, is completely unrealistic and actually undermining the growth and the experiences that young children have. And when you do that, you teach kids boredom, because now you've imbued that experience that you must be bored with that experience because the instructor keeps going over and over again.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, what do you think you learned from this lesson again? Because most kids are still struggling, and even adults struggle with the same lesson over and over again because I've been teaching them for a long time. And lastly, you teach them contempt to the very people who are trying to educate them.
Yeah. Like that person's wasting your time because they keep going over the same thing over and over again. And when you don't allow a kid space to deal with some things on their own and then come back and check in with you and go over the same lesson over and over again, then again, you expect them to somehow get it when.
Yeah.
And when you ask most adults who are parents, did your parent handle you like that? Is that how you got to where you are now? Almost all of them are like, no, of course not. Well, then why is it going to work with your kid if it wouldn't have worked with you?
Yeah.
And my son is in kindergarten, and another 6-year-old boy told one of his classmates, said something along the lines of like, I could just punch you in the face, or don't make me punch you in the face, or something like that. So the other little boy was upset and kind of scared that this other bigger boy might hit him. So my son went up to him, he was like, we should tell an adult. Like, we should probably go tell an adult. And he got another friend to help this little boy go tell one of the teachers. And the teacher was kind of like, nah, whatever. Like, just didn't care, didn't give him the response back. So he comes home and tells me this because we've gone through a bunch of scenarios where I pretend to be the kid who pushes one of his friends. And then what do you do? So he was like, so we did it. We went and told the teacher, and the teacher didn't really seem to care. So the easiest response would for me, like, I'm calling the school and I'm going to blah, 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 and I'm going to make sure that this is taken seriously. Or I just tell my son, okay, so what did you guys do next? After, because you went to an adult, did you feel safe? Yeah, I mean, I feel safe. There's a teacher there the whole time, but she's not going to do anything about it. So we all stuck together, and tomorrow we're all going to stick together. And we told this other little boy that we'll all stick together just in case. There. So he learned something that he wouldn't have learned if I was like, let me stop you right there. I'm going to take over and handle this because you can't.
So I love this because, like I said, I did a self-defense seminar yesterday for some scouts that are older than your son. And this is the problem when your son not only has you, but he has me. So you think these things the way I think these things. So probably even if he wasn't studying martial arts with me, you'd be looking to help him problem solve.
But when someone outside of your family is also giving you the same information,
then he was doing this. He's 6.
Yeah.
6. Now, mind you, the kids I had yesterday were kind of in the 7 to 10-year-old range, somewhere in there. I asked them the same question. I said, because I was trying to get them to understand space and time, and how space and time create the opportunity to come up with better solutions. So I said to one of the kids, I said, what if I said, tomorrow at noon, I'm going to punch you in the face during recess? I said, what would you do? And he said, I would duck. I'm like, no. I'm saying tomorrow at noon. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, it's 3 in the afternoon. I said, if you guys are all here,
you're going to use your whole day planning to duck? That's what you got?
I said, so there's 7 or 8 kids there. And I said, what would you do? I said, you have 7 of you. how would you solve this problem? Trying to coax them in. There's 7 of you.
Yeah.
How would you guys figure out how to solve the problem? And every single answer was about the immediate threat at noon. I would do this, or I would do that. That's right. I would come up with a plan was one of the things that they said. I said, okay, what's your plan?
What is the plan?
What's the plan?
That's what I'm asking for.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, so what's the plan? To stick to the plan. I'm like, well, what's the plan? And again, one of the things that I think is lost is that there's scaffolding is one of the techniques that teachers do.
Yeah.
And then there's just building them a home and giving it to them. And I actually want them to build the scaffolding sometimes. So I'm even more annoying. Because I really want them to think. I don't want them being lazy, because self-defense is really about being proactive, including being proactive about your boundaries so you're not in the fight in the first place.
Because you could have just told them, here's what you should do. Here, this should be your plan.
Exactly.
But then they don't learn anything.
Exactly. And I said, and I gave them a little bit more of a hint to try and build a scaffolding. I said, well, do you all go to school together? I'm leading them down the pathway. And then they're like, oh, we would have a plan. Okay, we're getting closer. I said, we're on the we part.
Baby steps.
And then eventually they came up with what your son just said. But these are kids that are uninitiated.
Yeah.
They're not being educated in conflict resolution, which is exactly why they don't have the tools to even come up with the thought process of, hold on a second. Oh, and then we can actually solve this problem ourselves. And then what's interesting is once they realized there was a we to it, the cascade of answers came out, which is, we would tell our parents, we would tell a teacher, we would, and we would surround our friend and make sure he was safe.
Your numbers are getting bigger and bigger, and you're one person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this was the goal of the class, which is the program they use, the See, Say, Do, Ask, Tell, Yell. I said this is the importance of seeing a problem first, asking the problem to stop. Big guy approaching me, don't understand why he's approaching me. If I step to the side and you keep following me, I say, hey man, can you stay right there? Do you need something? What's going on? Why are you following me? And then telling someone, and then yelling, so that you're drawing more and more attention. And the only way you can draw more and more attention to your problem is by having time. And time is governing space. And that means you have to be alert and govern your space. Your 6-year-old son gets that already. But you can see why my concern for these generations coming up is that they are not only not being taught, in some ways they're being taught incorrectly about conflict.
Definitely.
And once they're being taught incorrectly about conflict, they have no way to solve problems. Once they have no way to solve problems, that's when the isolation, the feeling bad about themselves and depressed, and then if they near hopelessness. So this is the thing, is if they're taught conflict resolution at an early age, they never get to hopelessness.
Yeah.
Because they've learned to solve problems on their own.
If you don't know how to solve problems, most situations have hopelessness in them.
And the issue is not that they've learned to solve problems on their own, meaning alone. They've learned to understand that sometimes getting other people involved in their problems is the right thing to do. Sometimes it's not.
Which is learned helplessness.
Yes.
The model of, I can't do anything for myself ever, and they internalize it. And what do they usually tell kids? Administrators usually tell kids who get into a fight, next time this person says that mean thing or this person says that, go tell a teacher, go tell an adult. That's the end of their imparting of information, and they think it was effective because the kids go, okay.
Yes.
Not realizing, again, the power differential, the kids aren't going to be like, well, I did last week, and your teacher's useless, and they didn't do anything. What about that? The kid's not going to do that. This is an authority figure. They're taught to respect what the authority figure says. So because the authority figure gets no feedback, they think they're being effective, not realizing that someone needs to ask them, well, what happens if they go tell one of your teachers and your teacher doesn't do anything, or ignores it, or doesn't feel like handling it, or knows you're going to overreact to it with this whole bullying thing, so they don't tell you on purpose because they think you'll make it worse.
Yes.
What about all that stuff? How do you tell them to deal with all that stuff? Oh, we don't. Well, then you're not preparing them for anything.
Kids can't be advocate for themselves without being taught. We teach this to adults. what you do for a living, and what I do for a living is self-advocacy. That's really what we're
Primarily,
doing.
yeah.
And if a kid at of that age is dealing with an immediate problem, which is someone's about to punch them or push them or whatever it is that they're going to do, you're like, hold on, bully, I need to go tell somebody. What do you think they're going to do?
Yeah.
Push you, grab you, punch you faster.
Yeah.
They're going to keep you from going that way. What do you think the fight is? It's to restrict your movement. It's to make sure that you are under the control of the person who is controlling you. And what's interesting is, for people who might think that we're being a little bit extreme, I have taught 4-year-olds who have already been taught incorrectly for decades. And one of the experiences just happened last week. So I'm teaching a 4 or 6-year-old class. I'm teaching them about how to protect themselves from choke escapes. Again, if you don't know that young kids choke each other, then you're being naive.
Yeah.
And a 4 to 6-year-old, one of the things they need to understand is what is an appropriate response, and kicking and punching the other kid isn't always the best response, especially since some kids just get excited delirium, and they just grab kids. They don't even know why, and it's happened to some of my students. Luckily, they knew how to do it safely, so not punching and kicking their friend in the teeth. They're escaping, like, dude, what's wrong? Oh, sorry, I just got really excited.
Yeah.
So one of the 4-year-olds says to me, I would just call 911. And I look at them, I said, where's your phone? Then he says, well, I would have my mom call 911. I said, you're at school. Where's your mom? And then it would be, well, I would just tell the teacher. I said, someone's hands are around your neck already.
Yeah.
And they've been taught to have someone else solve their problems so often that they don't understand immediacy. And this is the immaturity that you and I are talking about that cannot be rectified and cannot be educated if people remove the possibility for that educational process to happen, or deny the repetition of said education from happening, or believe that the learning has occurred magically just because it's been taught that moment.
And there's a major problem if someone says to you, how would you handle that situation? And all of your answers are about other people. And when you keep saying, no, how would you handle it? If you almost don't even understand the question.
Yes.
Like, I almost don't understand what you're asking for, because that's how foreign it is to me that I could manage a situation.
Yeah.
That kid's in infinitely more danger.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to have this conversation, because there are some people who, when you and I started with this conversation, which is just that you can't just eradicate all violence, especially in young boys, but in young boys and young girls, you can't just get rid of it. It's like, oh, the two of them are basically saying kids should fight each other.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have to listen to all this rationale, because when you get to the end of it, I would love to hear someone say back why we're wrong on all of this.
Yeah.
And never experiencing any of this prepares you better for experiencing it as an adult.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to argue with.
Well, because the word experience is the answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the answer.
How do you climb a mountain? I don't know. Start off small.
Yeah. I'm not going to go climb Everest when I haven't ever climbed anything.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't climbed out of the couch yet.
And if I told you, a good friend of mine had never climbed anything, hadn't even climbed a steep hill in his life, and died on Everest, you'd be like, I'm sure he did.
Yes.
Sounds like that was a bad decision.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, Everest is so dangerous.
Yes.
That wouldn't be your first comment. You'd be like, why was he on Everest and who let him go?
What genius encouraged him to do that?
Exactly. Why didn't someone stop him?
Yeah.
That's the first line of questioning.
Yeah. And this is the ultimate setup. In a weird way, to bring it into the trolling, this is the ultimate trolling of a generation, is to set them up for complete and utter failure. And it's no wonder why that age group is the highest rate of suicide than it's ever been, because they've been unprepared for the basic rigors of life. It's not as if from age 0 to 10 they've lived in a cocoon, and then at age 10 we put them in the salt mines, or they're in a coal mine.
Yeah.
And then they're just dying from the work after basically just standing on their legs for the first time at 10 years old. We are literally teaching them incorrect methodologies on how to deal with basic daily conflict how to organize themselves, how to manage time, how to tie their shoes. If you end up doing everything for a child up to age 10 and or removing all possible obstacles or sheltering them from potential failure. Again, this is a generalization, obviously. I'm not, of the main issue. Not all parents are like this, obviously, because we're talking about this. But if that is what's happening, then there's no wonder why this increase of stress and anxiety is occurring, coupled with adults acting in a way that they would not want their children to act on their own. So when you're talking to your friend on the phone, like, oh man, that guy just needs a punch in the face. Well, then no wonder why a kid goes to school and says, I'm just going to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening. Or they're watching TV that way. Again, it's not that they can't watch that TV, but if an adult isn't explaining, let's talk about comedy, reality, exaggeration, right? Hyperbole. Yeah. And even if they don't understand those words, guess what? Break them down for them. If they don't understand the words, describe what it means. If I said, oh my God, I'm so happy, I wish I could just jump up and touch the sky. Well, you can't do that, obviously. I'm making a statement that expresses just how joyed I am, and it's an unrealistic possibility, which is trying to express how excited I am. I'm so depressed I could shoot myself. Uh-oh, quick! Grab the, put him in handcuffs and send him into a straitjacket and lock him up for life. No, just an exaggeration.
And like you said,
had a bad day.
We're not saying all parents do this in this generation, just like parents of previous generations were labeled as much more punitive.
Yes.
It doesn't mean every parent in that generation was punitive, but it is the trend of a certain generation.
Yes.
And everyone has their own thought of which generation I'm talking about, which is exactly my point.
Yes.
Because that's the trend of that generation.
Yes.
The trend of this generation is this kind of a thing that we're talking about, which is creating a generation of kids who are unprepared. And then you start to think about the power in the message of you can't keep yourself safe at a very young age. You need someone else to keep yourself safe. And then they go to that something else, and that doesn't work.
Yes.
Then the world's scary, everything's scary, and my parents told me that this is how you handle this, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
It must be my fault.
Yep.
So I must not be good. I must not be good at this.
Or
and
not worth protecting, which is the other subliminal message of this seed of nihilism that starts to grow at a very young age.
So I'm helpless and unworthy. In a general sense, not even a specific sense.
Yeah.
At least if it's I'm not good at baseball, there's recovery from that.
Yes.
Because I am good at robotics. I'm good at math. Whatever the other thing is, I'm good at soccer, but I'm terrible at basketball. When it's just you're helpless and unworthy in general, that's crushing. And if you give that to a 4-year-old, it's only going to build and mutate over time. And then you add in all the social media stuff and the permanency of everything we talked about. You put all that together, it's amazing kids are doing as well as they are.
Yes.
It's the opposite. It's not like why are kids having more trouble and more anxiety now. It's amazing they're surviving this environment as well as they are surviving this environment.
Yeah, because we're obviously not giving them the proper tools.
No.
Yeah. I don't know, I think that's a pretty good wrap.
I think it is.
That's a good,
that's a good
solid ending.
Absolutely.
Oh, rock on. All right, until the next one.